When the ship finally docked, everyone was glued to the news. Their phones lit up with maps, alerts, canceled flights, and shaky videos showing smoke over places we weren't supposed to be anywhere near. A woman near my cabin was crying because she just wanted to get back to Dallas. Some guy in a windbreaker was shouting at the guest services desk like they'd started the war themselves. And me? I was standing barefoot in front of a mirror, hand on the doorknob, feeling sick over one stupid, embarrassing truth. I didn't want to get off that ship looking like a man again. That's the part I still have trouble admitting. Not the change in plans, not the lockdown, not the confusion, not even the lying, because there was plenty of that, and most of it was my fault. No, what sticks with me is that after 2 weeks at sea, with the world outside feeling loud and dangerous, the safest I'd felt in years was inside that suite, with the curtains half drawn and clothes lying around me that were never meant for me. I know how that sounds. If I heard someone else say it, I'd think they were holding something back, some cheap twist, something just meant to shock. But it didn't happen like that. It happened slowly. That's what made it real. Before that cruise, my life was painfully normal. I was 34, worked in operations for a medical supply company outside Raleigh, lived alone in an apartment that always felt temporary, and answered, "I'm fine," so often I almost started believing it. My marriage had ended 11 months earlier, not with a bang, just with exhaustion. The kind of ending where nothing explodes, it just stops breathing. After that, I became very good at functioning. Wake up, shower, work, eat lunch at my desk, come home tired, scroll endlessly, sleep poorly, repeat. And underneath all of it, there was one secret I had spent years keeping small enough to live around. Nothing dramatic, just little moments. A sweater in my hands that made the room go quiet. Too much time spent lingering in the women's section at Target. 2 private purchases in my entire life, both thrown away within days. That was the pattern. Approach. Panic. Erase. So when I booked that cruise, I told myself I just needed a reset. Quiet. Distance. A few days where nobody knew me. But 3 nights in, the route changed. The crew started smiling too hard. The ship got tense. And somewhere in the middle of all that fear and confusion, somebody made a mistake with my name. That was all it took. The call came a little after 9 in the morning. I'd just gotten back from breakfast, annoyed because half the ship was lined up at guest services and nobody was saying anything clearly. CNN was on mute. One shoe was off. I remember that because I was rubbing the arch of my foot when the cabin phone rang. "Mr. Callahan?" "Yes. Due to current health and security measures, you've been reassigned to a private wellness residence in the spa wing." I sat up straight. "I'm sorry, what?" "It's already been authorized, sir. A staff member will escort you shortly. There has to be some kind of mistake." There was a pause, then that polished customer service voice. "This relocation is for your comfort and privacy." That should have made me argue more. Instead, 10 minutes later, I was being led through a quieter part of the ship I hadn't seen before. The air changed first. Less sunscreen, more eucalyptus. Softer carpet. Lower lighting. Everything hushed and expensive, like we'd stepped out of a cruise ship and into some luxury wellness ad for rich people with burnout. At the end of the corridor, they opened a suite that was nicer than anything I should have had access to. Pale furniture. Gold fixtures. A soaking tub by the window. Garment boxes stacked on a chaise. Perfume in the air. A handwritten welcome card next to a bowl of fruit. I picked it up. "Welcome, Ms. Caroline. The retreat team is honored to host you during your private stay." For 1 second, I actually felt relieved. Good, I thought. Finally, the obvious mistake. I turned to the staff member behind me. "This isn't mine." She glanced at the card, then at her tablet, and gave me a distracted smile. "Yes, sir. Your personalized amenities will be updated shortly." "No, listen," I said. "I'm not Caroline." "Of course." She stepped back toward the door. "Lunch details are on the desk. Your wellness packet is beside the vanity. Wait." But she was already leaving. "Someone will be with you soon, Mr. Callahan." Then the door shut, and I was alone. alone in a suite full of soft light, cosmetics, tissue paper, satin slippers, and somebody else's life. I should have walked straight back into the hall. I should have made enough noise to get the mistake fixed. Instead, I stood there holding that card, looking around a little too carefully. At the robe hanging by the bathroom, at the open garment box, at the mirror lights glowing over the vanity, and what I felt was an excitement. It was something quieter than that, something worse. Recognition. I did try to fix it. That's the part that matters. Because if I skip over it, it sounds like I walked into that suite and immediately gave in. Like I'd been waiting my entire life for permission, and all it took was one unlocked door. It wasn't like that. I called guest services twice, got put on hold twice. The first person thanked me for my patience and said the spa wing had separate coordination because of temporary health protocols. The second told me my case had already been flagged and someone would follow up in person. Nobody came. I opened the door once and looked out into the hallway, half expecting a manager to come hurrying toward me with an apology. But it was empty. Just soft music somewhere in the distance and the faint rattle of a service cart. I should have marched out and fixed it myself. Instead, I stepped back inside and shut the door. That's how these things happen sometimes. It wasn't some huge dramatic collapse, but more like a pause, a little silence. It was that moment after you've done the right thing, and no one rushes in to save you from your own curiosity. I started pacing the suite like I was inspecting a crime scene. There was a binder on the desk detailing meal options, spa schedules, and private wellness sessions. Next to it, a packet with a name sticker clipped to the front, Caroline. On the chaise lounge sat 3 cream-colored garment boxes with ribbon tabs. One was already open, revealing a pale lounge set folded neatly over tissue paper inside. Nothing flashy, no lingerie, just soft, expensive fabric in a muted blush color. The kind of thing that looked effortless until you realized it probably cost more than my monthly electric bill. I stared at it longer than I should have. Then, a knock at the door. I jumped, almost swore. A young woman in a spa uniform wheeled in a tray with tea, fruit, and some bottled green juice. She smiled at me without a hint of confusion. "Mr. Callahan," she said, as if everything was perfectly normal. "Your interim wardrobe options may arrive in stages while inventory is being reorganized." My mouth opened, then snapped shut. She set the tray by the window. "If you need alternate sizing, steaming, or tailoring pins, just let us know." I gripped the counter behind me. "This is temporary, right?" She gave me the same careful smile everyone on that ship seemed trained to wear. "Everything is temporary right now, sir." Then she left, and that sentence lingered in the room with me. I sat down near the open box and looked at that folded top again, then at the mirror, then back at the door. I told myself I was just checking the size. That was the lie I used to touch it. The fabric was softer than I expected, not costume soft, not silly, just well-made, quiet, serious. I held it up in front of me and caught my reflection in the mirror. Not dressed, not transformed, just me, standing there holding it. And the shock of that moment was how natural it looked. Not sexy, not glamorous, just familiar. That was the first time I felt real fear. Not fear of being caught, but fear of what it might mean if I wasn't joking anymore. I lasted until just after lunch. I wish I could tell you it took longer, that I held out for days, that I stayed angry, stayed sensible, stayed on the right side of whatever line I was standing near. But I didn't. I was alone. My phone signal kept cutting in and out. News alerts loaded halfway, then froze. Outside the windows, the sea looked flat and silver, like the whole ship had been pinned in place. And sitting 3 feet away from me was that open box. I told myself I was only going to try on the top for a second, that was all. I checked the lock, then the privacy latch. Then I pulled the curtains tighter, even though they were already half closed. I took off my polo shirt like I was handling evidence. And then I put the top on. No lightning, no dramatic music, no sudden transformation. Just soft fabric sliding over my shoulders, and then this awful, quiet stillness inside me. That was the part I wasn't ready for. Not excitement, not even happiness, but relief. The kind that scares you because it arrives too fast, like some noise you've been living with for years suddenly shuts off, and only then do you realize how exhausted you were. I stepped closer to the mirror. The fit wasn't perfect. It hung a little loose through the middle. The neckline showed more of my collarbone than I was used to. My face still looked like mine, tired, stubbled, wary, but something about the softness changed the way I stood in it. Less braced, less defensive, like my body had stopped performing. I don't know how long I stood there, 30 seconds, maybe 3 minutes. Then someone knocked. I tore it off so fast I nearly twisted my wrist. "Just a minute," I called, and my voice cracked. By the time I opened the door, I was back in my polo. A staff member handed me a shopping bag and a clipboard. "Supplemental amenities, Mr. Callahan," she said. Inside the bag was a robe, slippers in another size, and a printed card that read, "For your comfort during private stay." That should have been the moment I put a stop to it. Instead, the next morning, I found myself listening for the knock breakfast tray. Coffee, fruit, another note slipped under the door. Later, another box-soft gray loungewear this time, a small pouch with lip balm, hand cream, face mist. Nothing dramatic, which made it worse. Because none of it felt like a joke anymore. It felt ordinary, gentle, easy to step into. By the third day in that suite, I had started dividing my life into before the knock and after it. I still had my own clothes folded in the closet. I could see them every time I opened the door. But more and more often, I reached for what they brought me instead. Not because I had to, but because I wanted the feeling that came with it. The silence, the softness, the few private minutes in front of the mirror before I had to decide what any of it meant. And somewhere in the middle of that routine, I realized something I did not want to admit. I had stopped waiting for them to correct the mistake. I was waiting for the next excuse not to go back. By the fourth day, fear had settled into the room. Not big, dramatic fear, but specific fear. The kind that sharpens your hearing and changes the way you breathe. Every sound in the hallway meant something. Cartwheels, soft footsteps, a latch clicking shut, voices passing too close to the door. Once, laughter close enough that I froze in front of the vanity with moisturizer half rubbed into my face, staring at the knob like it might turn. That was the strange shift. At first, I'd been afraid of being mistaken for someone else. Now, I was afraid of being seen correctly. I started crafting these little routines that would have sounded totally bonkers if I'd said them out loud. I kept one of my shirts draped over a chair just in case someone knocked unexpectedly. I even timed my showers around when I expected meal deliveries. And I'd check the peephole before opening the door, even when I was dressed, because dressed just didn't feel simple anymore. One afternoon, I heard two women chatting right outside the suite. I was wearing that gray wrap top they'd sent up that morning, and I just spritzed my face because the dry air on the ship was making my skin feel all tight. Nothing dramatic, really. Still, I panicked like I was a thief. I bolted for the bedroom, nearly ate it on the rug, and stood there holding my breath until their voices faded down the hall. The shame that washed over me after that was even worse than the fear, because panic doesn't lie. A guy who was just messing around would have laughed it off and changed. A guy who didn't have anything at stake would have fixed the mistake days ago and gone back to his old cabin. But that wasn't me anymore, and I knew it. The worst scare came that night. Around 7, there was a knock while I was standing at the vanity with the headband on, trying out a little tinted moisturizer sample under the lights. I barely rubbed it in. My face looked softer somehow, less harsh, less hidden. Then the knock came again. "Mr. Callahan?" a man's voice. Everything inside me just seized up. I grabbed a towel, scrubbed at my face, ripped the headband off, and nearly knocked my elbow into the vanity stool. By the time I opened the door, my skin was red, and I could still feel the moisturizer clinging near my hairline. A security officer was standing there with a tablet. "Routine check, sir. We're just confirming all temporary relocation guests are accounted for." He glanced past me into the room. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. "That's me," I said. He nodded. "You have everything you need?" For one insane second, I almost laughed. Everything I needed? No. I had way too much, actually. "I'm fine," I said. He thanked me and moved on. I closed the door, went straight to the bathroom, and stared at myself under the bright lights, cheeks flushed, eyes wide, a faint trace of color still clinging near my temple. I should have felt ridiculous. Instead, I felt exposed in a way that was much, much worse. Like someone had almost caught me living my real life. By day 5, the suite had become the most honest place I'd lived in for years. That probably sounds dramatic, but I don't know how else to put it. Outside the door, the ship was still a tense place. Port changes, security updates, passengers swapping rumors over bad coffee. Every time my phone caught enough signal to refresh, there were more headlines, more maps, more proof that the world outside was falling apart. But inside that room, my life had narrowed to smaller things. Morning light through the curtains, steam on the bathroom mirror, the sound of a tray being set down outside my door, the private question of what I'd put on afterward, the strange calm that came when I stopped forcing my body into the version of masculinity I'd worn my whole life without even thinking about it. The first time I realized I was actually waiting for the knock, I felt sick to my stomach. Not because I wanted luxury, not because I wanted to be pampered, but because each new delivery gave me one more reason not to go back. That afternoon, they sent up a pale blue blouse. Simple, loose-fitting, nothing flashy, just the kind of thing a woman could wear to brunch or a casual office and never think twice about. I put it on slowly. Then I looked up, and for one clean, brutal second, I didn't see a man pretending. I saw someone who looked lighter than the person who'd boarded that ship. That was what broke me. Not the blouse, not the mirror, the recognition. How hard I had worked for years to stay just 1 inch outside my own comfort zone so nobody would have to ask questions. How much of my personality was really just containment, editing, survival. I sat on the edge of the bed and cried with one hand over my mouth because once that feeling hit, I couldn't reduce it back to mere curiosity. Curiosity is light, temporary. This felt like grief mixed with relief. And once you feel that, there's no going back. That evening, I took my old clothes out of the closet. Jeans, belt, navy t-shirt, socks, loafers. I laid them across the bed like evidence that I still had a way back. I stood over them for a long time, then picked up the t-shirt and pulled one arm through and just stopped. My whole body resisted. Not some big dramatic thing. Just this hard internal recoil, like trying to force myself into a posture I'd outgrown. I stood there half-changed, breathing hard, staring at the bed. Then I took the shirt back off. That was the moment I knew. The real panic had never been about being seen like this. It was about being forced to go back after finally seeing myself clearly. The announcement came just after breakfast. The captain's voice came over the speakers, smooth and calm, telling us we had been cleared to dock under new security procedures. Passengers were to remain calm. Disembarkation would happen in phases. I stood in the middle of the suite with my coffee in my hand and felt my stomach drop. That should have been good news. Everyone on that ship wanted off. They wanted land, flights, familiar roads, kitchens, dogs, office chairs, anything ordinary. The whole place had been wound tight for days, but all I could think was, "It's over." I looked around the room like it had betrayed me. The robe on the hook, the open pouch on the vanity, the cardigan thrown over the chair, the tissue paper still hanging out of one of the boxes because I'd even stopped pretending I wasn't using what they brought. For the first time since they moved me there, the suite felt temporary again. I laid my old clothes on the bed. Jeans, belt, navy t-shirt, loafers. A complete man, arranged in pieces. I tried. That matters to me. I actually tried. I slipped off the cardigan, grabbed the shirt, managed to get one arm in, and then I just stopped. My body wouldn't let me continue. Not in some over-the-top way, like you see in movies. It was a firm, silent resistance I simply couldn't overcome. So, I took it off again. That was it. Decision made. When my group was called, I opened the suite door and stepped into the hallway trembling. I fully expected stares, a reprimand, someone to stop me and force me back into the mold. But no one did. A cleaning lady walked past with a stack of towels, barely giving me a glance. A couple near the elevators were bickering over luggage tags. A man in the elevator was engrossed in updates about troop movements and port closures, not even sparing me a second look. And somehow that stung even more, because I had imagined this moment as one of judgment, exposure, humiliation. Instead, the world just kept spinning. Reaching the lower deck, I could see the harbor through the glass. Gray water, security boats, officials standing on the dock, buses lined up, waiting. Just real life, presented in drab, practical hues. Everyone else seemed relieved. I stared at those doors and felt a wave of grief wash over me. Because the ship had trapped me, yes, but it had also forced me to be honest with myself. At the doorway, just before stepping off, I glanced back towards the quiet upper decks, where the spa was tucked away somewhere above. And I realized something I still haven't forgotten. The man who boarded that cruise hadn't vanished. He was simply the part of me that had been doing all the hiding. Then I stepped into the daylight carrying more truth than I knew what to do with. And for the first time in my life, hiding from it felt more isolating than being seen. If you were standing on that dock, would you go back to your old life? Or keep walking forward?